We're back for another Dirty Story Night. This one is brought to you by Shane. Shane is going to do MadLab MadLibs. Of course, because that definitely needs to be done. Before he does that, though, and he's going to be talking about lots of people involved with MadLab, good inside jokes, but also a funny story, we want to highlight our parent network. It's All Been Done Presents. Go to IABDpresents.com for all of our great content. Did you know we have videos? We do. We have a YouTube channel, and we post all kinds of different random videos on that channel. QBC book discussions, behind-the-scenes stuff with Radio Hour, some in front of the scenes stuff with Radio Hour. Lots of cool, interesting things. So go to IABDpresents.com or just go to YouTube and search IABD Presents or It's All Been Done Presents and subscribe to our channel. Now enjoy Shane's MadLab Dirty Story Night, which was the second place finisher.
All right. Whoops. All right. So I wanted to write a MadLab sketch that involved people from MadLab, but I didn't want to be creepy because I don't know you that well yet.
Bullshit.
So,
A great way to get to know people is to have sex with them.
interesting point. Okay. So I decided that I would, borrow a concept from my friend Bob, and this is going to be the Bob Loblaw's MadLab MadLab. So, first I'm going to ask you for MadLib things. So, in no particular order. So, remember, you picked this. I did not pick this. So whatever weird combinations there are, it wasn't me. Just to be clear. The case of the inserted and discarded pumpkin. Everyone was wondering why this emergency ensemble meeting was called with such urgency. Woos got up and addressed the group. Well, everyone, we called this meeting to discuss a certain event that happened. You see, last night we found an object lying in the middle of the stage, covered in peanut butter. There were gasps and chuckles from the group. Greg looked especially nervous, and you could see the sweat starting to develop on his forehead. Woos continued. So, who wants to fess up to the pumpkin? The room was met with silence. Come on, guys. We just need to know who to give it back to. You aren't in trouble. More silence. Eric shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Woos sighed. If no one fesses up, Colleen and I are going to have to enact Clause 52B.32 of your ensemble contract. Since none of you asked to opt out, you'll have to comply. Kat gasped, knowing exactly what this clause was, as she was the only one who actually read the handbook. Greg asked, what is Clause 52B.32? Colleen replied, mandatory nudeness, or the Kathy Bates Clause. After a shorter than you'd expect series of objections, soon everyone was naked. People started cautiously looking around at everyone else, partly out of a natural sense of curiosity, partly out of a morbid fascination of who could actually fit a pumpkin inside themselves. Let's make this a little less interrogation and a little more friendly. Everyone moved down to the stage. One by one, people made their way to the set, which was still set up from sketchy sacks. Randy and Laura quickly claimed the love seat for themselves. Lance awkwardly stood behind it, his bushy danger noodle hovering inches from Randy's face. Laura didn't seem to mind. In fact, she couldn't stop staring at it. Perhaps it was the size or the fact it was shaped like a tuba. You picked this. Brendan sprinted towards the bed, his tiger kitty flopping around, smacking his leg as he ran, causing Becky to lose her shit and keel over laughing. This was kind of a turn on for Pepe, who was standing behind her. He could see everything, a little different than he had imagined, which he did quite frequently. He figured this was his only chance, so he reached down and started exploring her hot dog bun. He would later explain that this wasn't for pleasure, but for science. Remember, they were trying to figure out who inserted the pumpkin inside themselves. Seeing this happen to Becky inspired everyone to start exploring for science as well. Nikki, Casey, and Shayna started a human centipede on the couch. This was a new experience for Casey, but he would later admit that he didn't hate it. Shayna was a little pissed that she was the tail end of the centipede, but she hoped that since they weren't actually sewn together, they could all eventually rotate positions and she could finally use the joke she'd been saving, "I prefer syrup." No? No one? Okay. Thank you. Kyle joined Jim on the bed, making use of the handcuffs. She restrained him to the headboard and then started performing an Alabama Hot Pocket on him. Pete decided he'd try and join in. He'd never been with a guy, but seeing the couch-sized and shaped Herman, he decided to go with it. All three were really getting into it until he kept trying to convince them to switch to Cleveland Steamer instead. They weren't having any of that nonsense. Kyle said, "Go to Bangkok if you want to do that shit." Pete slinked away to the booth upstairs so he could watch from a distance, being careful to not get anything on the equipment for fear of electrocution. It was then that Woos broke the sound of slurps and squishes. "Well, who was it? Surely by now it should be obvious." He looked around. The only one on the couch who could talk was Nikki, and as she was the head of the centipede, but her eyes were rolled to the back of her head from pleasure. She wasn't going to be any help. Over on the love seat, Laura couldn't talk because she had taken Lance's pipe cleaner and was currently working on extracting that China glitter. Randy was inspired by the sketchy sex orgy scene and was currently and carefully using Jess, the red swing line stapler, to pleasure herself to a tiny death. Kat broke the silence, but it wasn't to solve the mystery. Instead, she was yelling at Chad, "You better have a condom, because I'm not getting your spooge on me." He pulled one out, and she replied, "Never mind." "Why?" he asked. "It's blue." Woos was getting frustrated. How could no one know who inserted the pumpkin? It should be so easy to identify. It had only been a day. No one would recover in that short span of a time from an object of that size. He knew it wasn't him. He knew it wasn't Colleen on account of they gets it on the regular. How could it not be any of them? What could he be missing? He looked around again, and it was then, surrounded by his naked close friends and castmates, wet, moaning, yanking, tweaking, that he realized a very vital piece of information that he had forgotten. James Daly also had a key.